All right, thank you. Welcome to the CloudForms technical roadmap. My name is John Hardy. I'm the product manager for Red Hat CloudForms. This is a pretty big deck, and I've got some guest speakers to my right here that will be joining me on stage to go through some of the items that are coming in CloudForms. For those of you who are here, you may have seen that there was a press release today that released CloudForms 4.1. So that's generally available. We're going to go through some of the features that have dropped in the CloudForms 4.1 release today, as well as go through what is going to be CloudForms 4.2 going forward. Obviously, standard disclaimer, everything I say will be true, and we will deliver on it, or possibly not. Okay, so just a couple of briefing slides at the beginning. Forgive me for this. We've got a Red Hat Management Suite, and inside the Red Hat Management Suite, we've got a number of products that are going to play a very important part in particularly operations. So as the digital transformation is coming to us, we need more operations. For this particular roadmap session, we're going to be concentrating on the Red Hat CloudForms product, which is part of the Red Hat Management Suite. As I said, we're going to be going through 4.1, 4.2, and what's next. As I said, this slide deck is pretty big. It's very technical, and it's very long. And the reason for that is just that CloudForms has now become a very, very large, wide spectrum product. It now supports GCE, Google Compute Engine, it supports AWS, it supports Azure, it supports SCVMM. The list just keeps going on and on and on. So when we come to you to tell you about the deltas, the changes that we've made to the product over the last 6 months, it is going to take quite a long session to go through that. So forgive me as I go through the slides at a very, very fast pace. Okay. Primary themes for 4.1. This is the stuff that you saw drop this morning. We particularly made attention to user experience, improving the VMware support, and then we've extended our hybrid cloud support by adding new providers on Google and increasing our coverage on both Microsoft and OpenStack. So the self-service user interface, the SSUI that you saw first turn up in 4.0, how many people are using the new self-service UI? Show of hands. That's an interesting story we've actually had from a few accounts. The self-service UI came in 4.0. All you need to do is just access it by putting self_service on the end of the URL, and then you get this fantastic new interface. And this new interface is for the consumers to be able to come into CloudForms. They're multi-tenanted. They get remote control access to their virtual machines or services that they're putting out there. We've also added shopping cart experience. So very much like when you go to Amazon and you buy something and you can add lots and lots of items to your shopping cart and then order it at the end, you can now do that inside of CloudForms. You can build catalogs and order them in one go. The future there is to actually extend it and allow users to share those catalogs and email them to each other and so on. We also added service reconfiguration, so as you deploy a service, you can reconfigure it afterwards. And then, obviously, we've added 5 new languages, and there's some of my European buddies that we love. Inventory and provisioning for VMware on the cluster support. It was very important because VMware has introduced a number of technologies through versions 4, 5, and 6 of vSphere, and we've made particular effort to try and catch up those capabilities. So clustered data store support is there. We can also add disks to virtual machines now, and we also do VDS, Virtual Distributed Switch inventory. So when you order a virtual machine, you can select the VDS or the virtual distributed switch that you want to attach to, and it's live and it's all there. Onto hybrid cloud support. So we made particular attention to a number of providers here. We've got Google, we've got Azure, we've got Ansible, and then there's a very new provider type, networking, and we'll discuss that in just a second. So the first provider to discuss here would be the Microsoft one, the Azure. Now, Azure first landed in CloudForms 4.0 in December. So as it came around to 4.1, we've matured that offering, and we're now offering Smart State. So again, a quick question. Who knows about Smart State and leverages Smart State? Okay. So what Smart State does, as a few of you were there, Smart State allows you to forensically analyze a virtual machine. Okay, so whether that virtual machine is powered on or powered off, we can forensically go into the disk of the virtual machine and abstract from it all of the users, the groups, the patches, the applications, the files. And that allows you to build use cases for state management. For instance, do not allow any virtual machines to start if they're suffering from Heartbleed. So Azure is the first cloud to get that. We already have this technology across our Virt platforms of OpenStack, VMware, Rev, and SCVMM. We've added event support for Microsoft so that we can see when virtual machines are created, when they're retired, and when they're powered down. We get all of the events, again, so we can build use cases around, do not allow a domain controller to be shut down if we see an event for power down. And then this is one of the first providers of two to get a native cloud appliance. So as you work with CloudForms, you'll be downloading it as an appliance. It's a single virtual machine appliance on VMware, Rev, SCVMM, and OpenStack. For Microsoft Azure, you can now get a native appliance that you can now upload directly into Azure. That allows you to use Azure without any on-premise virtualization technology at all. If you're just Azure only, you can work with CloudForms now natively. I'm going to hand over to Eric from Google, and Eric will go through the Google updates. Thank you.
Test. Okay, better. First, quick question. Has anybody ever heard of Google Compute Engine? Okay, awesome. Anybody ever actually used it? Tried it out? Okay. So there's a few people in here that I think are obviously going to probably want to kick the tires with this stuff. So I'm very excited to announce, with 4.1 release, we've been working with the Manage IQ community and also with John Hardy on CloudForms product to make sure that we've got GCE into CloudForms. I think we're lagging a little bit behind, so you saw a lot of good features coming out in Azure. So for our first pass through here in 4.1, we've got a lot of the basics, right, like inventory. You can obviously provision VMs, you can start and stop, so you can do the lifecycle management and power operations. We're working on events. We've got a little bit of a prototype going in there. The other thing that John mentioned also for the cloud appliance, this is also a feature that's available to you in Compute Engine. One of the features that we're working on in an upcoming release also is once you've got that deployed, so you're running CloudForms within Google Compute Engine, through our service account mechanisms and our ability to obtain credentials for the VM, you'll be able to spin up additional VMs as long as your CloudForms appliance is authorized to do that. So it'll be a nice seamless experience for provisioning machines within Google Cloud. So I think I've got a couple slides talking about 4.2, but I think that does a good job of covering sort of 4.1 features.
Thanks, Eric. And yes, Eric will be back with a couple of more new additions in the 4.2 map. So on to another provider, a new provider actually. We already have a configuration management provider today, Red Hat Satellite, and we're able to do bare metal provisioning through CloudForms to Red Hat Satellite customers. By adding Ansible now, we can do a number of things. We can take Ansible playbooks straight from the Galaxy and put them into Tower, or you guys can. And then from there, CloudForms can actually inventorize the entire Tower inventory. And then from there, we're able to do two things. We can attach an Ansible job template in Tower to a service. Now, that's pretty cool because that means that whatever that Ansible Tower job is doing, that playbook is achieving, can now be presented in the service catalog of CloudForms for your consumers, your users, to be able to do one-click order and achieve whatever that playbook is doing, whether that's instantiating a whole Hadoop cluster or it's just changing a setting on a VM. The second integration we've done for this is we've also allowed you to plug in Ansible to the automation state machines. Now, this is really, really key because today, or as of yesterday, your only choice for automation in CloudForms was really Ruby methods. Okay, you had to crack out the Ruby and start writing. It's a nice high-level language, so it's actually quite easy. What we've done now is we've really simplified the way to automate with CloudForms. So when you think of these orchestration engines from the other vendors where you have to get out your JavaScript and similar to us with our Ruby, to now we can use Ansible playbooks. You can take an Ansible playbook and you can slot it into a state machine, and now that state runs as an Ansible playbook in Tower. An example of doing this would be A provisioning workflow may be many, many steps. One of those steps could be to register it to the CMDB. Do you want to sit there and write the Ruby to do the registration to CMDB, or do you want to go straight to Galaxy and just download a playbook that does it for you and insert it? So we've really improved the way that you can work with Automate and really simplified, accelerated, and removed the need for much needed for consultancy to extend automation. The next provider is a very interesting provider. Software-defined networking is a new area for CloudForms. We didn't have networking exposed in CloudForms before, and with the help of Nuage, and Scott to my right here will be talking about the Nuage integration coming later, Nuage has helped us model the networking inside of CloudForms, created all of the relationships that are required between networks, routers, subnets, and all of the weird networking stuff that happens. And what that spun out for us was a example or a first pass provider, and we decided to do that with Neutron. Okay, so the Neutron service inside of OpenStack is now a provider inside of CloudForms. When you attach to OpenStack, it automatically adds Neutron as a separate provider under the networking tab. We give you the inventory, and not only do we do this across Neutron, we actually got for free at the same time Azure, AWS, and GCE, which is pretty clever. But going back to the Neutron side of things, we can now cross-link between the artifacts, the items that are in the network world, and the virtualization platform underneath. So an example of that would be a virtual machine connects to a port, which connects to a switch that connects to a router. We can graphically show you that in a topology view, and then all the way back the other way as well. So the VM is on a host, which is in a cluster that is in a data center. So topology and cross-linking you're going to see as common themes throughout this presentation. So on to provider updates. Hybrid cloud support was extended with more OpenShift capabilities. OpenStack extended a number of day 2 operations, and we'll go into all of these capabilities now. So OpenShift. OpenShift was delivered in 4.0 for CloudForms as a provider, and in that release we were getting the inventory, we're getting the metric detail, and so on. In CloudForms 4.1, as of today, you can now do chargeback across OpenShift with CloudForms. So we'll take all of that metric detail that we're collecting at the container and rolling up to the pods, and we'll now roll that up to the projects now, and you get nice, lovely dashboards that show you all of the information for metrics and utilization. We also integrated the SCAP scanner. So I've just talked about smart state analysis and how great smart state analysis is and how it can help you control state manage your environment. But that data that you're leveraging there, you have to put conditions around. You would have to say, is it available? Is it vulnerable to Heartbleed? By doing the SCAP scanner integration, we get told about it now. So when we do a scan of a container, not only are we doing a smart state scan of the container, but we also do an SCAP scan of the container as well. And we roll that back up into CloudForms when we can use the results of that inside of CloudForms to determine whether we're going to allow new containers to be spun from that image or not, for instance. We also have the cross-linking across more clouds, and I just talked about compliance management. OpenStack. So with OpenStack, we added SSH key management. The fundamental use case to that was if you take CloudForms with OpenStack, can you deploy a virtual machine on day one? And the answer, unfortunately, before was not without doing some SSH keys in OpenStack first. So you'd have to go to Horizon. With CloudForms 4.1, you do not need Horizon to start deploying virtual machines. You can go straight into CloudForms. You can spin up a new request for a virtual machine inside of OpenStack, and you can add your keys directly during provisioning or after. We also do volume management. So it's very important inside of these virtualization environments to be able to add and detach disks. You saw that on VMware. We added that capability there. We've also added a similar capability to OpenStack. Different terminology in the cloud is now volumes rather than disks. So as you go to your OpenStack instances, you can select them and you can add and detach volumes to them. And then there's some really clever capabilities coming along as well, as live migration is now supported. So because we've got the under and over cloud providers in CloudForms for OpenStack, we can now live migrate virtual machines across your OpenStack infrastructure. We've also switched finally to Ceilometer for our event capture. So we're still supporting the RabbitMQ buses and stuff like that before, but now we're also supporting Ceilometer, which is more of a strategic route forward. And finally, the two items in the middle, right size recommendations. We will tell you whether you've configured your OpenStack instances with too much CPU, too much memory, or not enough. So we can actually do that now inside of OpenStack, and we also allow you to change the instance flavor that is backing those instances. So if you find out that the instance is not sized correctly, that it needs to be increased in size, then all you need to do is just go into CloudForms again, change the instance flavor, bump it up a little bit, and then CloudForms will apply that change to your OpenStack environment. From an infrastructure point of view, we've also enabled SSL, but as far as consumer features, we've got scale down. So in CloudForms 3.2, we allowed you to scale out OpenStack environments. So if you had a cluster of compute nodes and you had a couple of spare nodes available to you, you could scale it out using CloudForms. You could click a few buttons, and CloudForms would speak to OpenStack Director and scale it out. Now it scales down too. We also support host evacuation. So, in an event of an emergency, you can click one button inside of CloudForms and it'll evacuate that host of all the instances to available hosts in the cluster. And then capacity planning. You can pick up a VM inside of CloudForms from VMware and see how many of those you can place inside your OpenStack environment, and vice versa. So we're now supporting more project management planning tasks between migrations. Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, this went for a transitionary period in 4.1 where the development teams changed, and now the Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization team now own and maintain the provider, very much like Google do with their provider. So what they've managed to do is they've managed to do a number of performance gains on the Rev provider that we will be rolling to the other providers as well, and then they've added cluster support. In the future, you'll see in 4.2 a bigger roadmap to Rev as they adopt. And finally, we've got chargeBack. So with chargeBack, we've got multi-currency support. So we support a number of different currencies there. We've got fixed and variable rating, which means that if you've got a fixed cost every single month for antivirus, you can put that on your VMs. You can say, right, every VM is going to have a $50 cost every month. But also, I would like to charge based on the utilization. So you can mix and match your rate tables inside of CloudForms to give the billing that you want. And then finally, tiered rating means quite simply that you're not restricted to charging just on 2 CPUs. You can now charge on 2 to 4, and then 4 to 6, and 6 to 8. The core platform also gained a number of changes. SAML support is now out of the box inside of 4.1 via IDM and Keycloak. We've added replication PG logical, which basically means that we're moving replication out of CloudForms and we're putting it into Postgres. That's a massive performance gain for some of the larger installations of CloudForms. Tenancy got some love, so it's now supported on chargeback, the SSUI, automate, reports, and so on. And then we discussed earlier how we've got cloud-native appliances for both Google and Azure now. So we're making good time. So CloudForms 4.2. CloudForms 4.2 is slated for around about December 2016, end of the year. And there's a number of key primary themes here. The first one is service brokering. We're going to go into quite a lot of depth on that one. We're also going to attend to customer experience, and then we're going to go through the provider updates as we just did on 4.1, and then I'll talk about the core platform. So, if I was to sum up what CloudForms 4.2 is going to be really about, it's going to be about service management. It's going to be about rolling up all of that forensic detail that we get, like the metrics, the events, the inventory. We're going to roll all of that up to the service. So as users come into CloudForms and they order, the common example is WordPress, they order WordPress from CloudForms, they're not concerned with where that's going. What they're interested in is it going to be performant? is it going to be costed to my liking? So that's really the main theme around CloudForms 4.2, is to make everything manageable at the service layer. I don't want to shut down one VM. I want to shut down the entire service. So a number of new technologies are going to come in to support service brokering. So let me just talk about what service brokering is about for CloudForms. We want to give people the ability to be able to choose when they order their service catalog item, whether they want to put it in the most performant destination or they want to choose the most cost-effective destination. Now, that's going to require a lot of changes inside of CloudForms to support this type of capability. And I've got help from Serena coming up soon to discuss how a lot of this is going to be coming in. But the first one that's going to come along is the service designer. Now, the service designer actually exists today. It exists because you're able to create services inside of the operations UI today. You can create services, you can put them in your catalog. But what the new service designer is going to do is it's going to operate at more a blueprint level. So you're going to be able to create this blueprint, and you're going to be able to put items on the blueprint. And those items are then going to bundle together and be published into the service catalog. And one of the key things that's going to enable this technology is relationships. So one of the use cases I'd like to discuss with you is, for instance, if I was to drag and drop two virtual machines onto a canvas and then drag a Elastic Load Balancer or Google Load Balancer onto the canvas, how do I get CloudForms to instantiate that canvas without me touching it? I don't want to write any automate. I don't want to plug anything in. I just want CloudForms to be able to put those two virtual machines inside of the GLB. And that's what relationships is going to do for us in Service Designer, is that it's going to allow us to drop things like Ansible playbooks onto the canvas and then say, these are to run on these VMs. So I don't want to steal too much thunder from Serena. We've probably got a duplication of slides here, but you can see the Service Designer here. Serena's got a really nice demo that she's going to go through that's going to show you, some of the technology that we're working on behind the scenes in the Service Designer world to help support the brokering use case. So,
can you help me when I come back after the demo? Help me get back into it. Okay, so what I'm going to show you today is a demo of it's essentially the front end. The back end is not necessarily all hooked up yet. And I'm going to be showing you some of the Service Designer functionality that will be released in 4.2 and futures, actually. So if you guys are familiar with self-service UI, you see dashboards, my services, my requests, and the service catalog that are already existing. What we're adding is a service design role, and if you are a service designer, you'll have the blueprints area. When you go into the blueprints area, you'll see a list of your blueprints, which have a name, last modified date, the number of items that you've dragged onto your canvas for that blueprint, as well as the visibility, what catalog it will be in its published state. And you'll have the ability to either edit, publish, duplicate, or delete these items. What I'm going to do now is just show how we can do multi-select and do a delete. And we'll do an auto confirmation for you, show you the actual names of the blueprints that you're going to delete to make sure you're not deleting something you don't want to, and it shows an inline notification. The next thing we're going to show is when you create a blueprint. It brings you to a canvas, which is drag and drop. When you add items onto here, what you're going to see is you're going to see things categorized very similarly to the new 4.1 categorization in the menus. So you can see compute, the cloud, containers, and infrastructure level. You can see configuration management, item storage, middleware. Like I said, some of these things are going to be in the future, but you will, whatever providers you have installed is the same information that you'll see here. For existing service items, which you already have created, you'll either be able to do a single click and it will put it onto your canvas, or you can do drag it and drop. You can also duplicate very easily, as well as remove items. What I'm going to do here quickly is just bring on a VMware item as well as an Ansible item, rename the blueprint on the top, and I'm going to then go back to the blueprints area, save the blueprint, and you'll see that designer has been there. I'll go down and I'm going to publish it. When I publish something, I have the ability to change the name, change the visibility to be either private, public, or a tenant, set it to a catalog that it's going to be available in, and also set the dialog that will be used. In addition to that, in this dialog, you'll see advanced options. And what I'm just going to quickly show you here is the change that we've made for ease of use and browsing. Instead of having to really delve down into all the folders, what we're doing is as soon as we're opening the directories until we find a leaf node, so you won't have to continue to open up things, and we're hoping that that's going to help with efficiency. When I publish this blueprint, I can then go into the service catalog area, and I'm going to filter for designer 1, and I'll see that my service is now available. So if your end user is using this, at this point you'll be able to see it. Now I'm just going to quickly go back into the blueprints area and show you a little bit more functionality that we have here. Again, I'm going to add some items. These may not make sense for a real service perspective, but what I'm just trying to show you is that we have improved our ability to set the action order and provision order. So I'm just going to add a bunch of items here. And then when you look at the blueprint details of these items, it will give you the ability to drag and drop things from a provisioning order perspective. So right now, everything's kind of ordered in the same place. I can bring one down to be asynchronously ordered and continue to change up the order as much as I want. I can also then select the action order. So by default, action order is the same as provision order. But if I deselect that checkbox, it will allow me to change the action order within the service itself. And there we go. I'm just going to save it. And again, rename it and save the blueprint. So you can see the two blueprints that we've created there. The next thing that I want to do is go back to the slide deck. Can you help me do that? Sorry.
Yeah, you should be able to.
And I just have, I think, 4 or 5 forward-looking, forward-looking mock-ups. So some of the things that John talked about was relationships, or I was calling them connectors. So what you can actually do, or what we're thinking about doing, and this is one of the things we're trying to get user feedback on, is what makes more sense. When you select an item and you want to connect it to something, what we're thinking of doing is when you say that you want to connect it, we would have the system understand what other service items you're able to connect to and kind of highlight those so that you can then make your selection. And you would drag over to those items that you want to connect, and then your connection would be available. In doing so, we're going to have to obviously present some kind of dialogue or wizard to help fill out the correct information, but that's the way that we're thinking right now. Another thing that we're talking about doing from a future perspective is allow versioning of your blueprints and services. So think of this as the end user looking at that dashboard. Currently, in the self-service UI, you only see services and requests. But what we're talking about doing is if you have updated services, this would be a really nice way for your end user to see those services that were available. And as well, on the bottom, what we're showing is featured services. So if a service designer wanted to have featured services or show that something's new, they'd have the ability to do that when they were creating their services themselves. And this last thing is something that we're thinking of, again, from an end user perspective. When they're looking at their own services, they see them in a list view, and giving them the ability to expand that list item so they can see more information about their service. And this would show them aggregated utilization for CPU, storage, and network for that service itself. And then if you decided to click on topology, again, this is the topology wizard, the topology widget that John was talking about. We would show actually the relationships within the items of your service and be able to get more information on those items themselves. So that's all I have. I'm going to be in Participation Square. If anybody wants to take a look at the demo, you're welcome to come on over, and I can give you some more insight into what we've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. I'm sure you agree that the changes that are happening in the UI of the product is amazing. You know, it's moving along leaps and bounds. And one thing that you may have noticed was that the service designer, which is really key to the service brokering, is actually embedded in the self-service UI. So if you have the role to author services, then you could do that inside of the SSUI using the SDUI. Okay. So staying on service brokering, inside of the service catalog, I talked earlier about how we're going to roll up all of the details. So when I order a service, I want to be able to see how much it's going to cost. We're going to be able to give you that detail inside of CloudForms 4.2 from a chargeback perspective. When I deploy a service, I want to see how performant that service is running at a service level. I don't want to see each individual VM. I just want to see WordPress or Hadoop cluster, how performant is it? And when we start to do that type of analysis, you're going to see that the brokering use case is going to be somewhat easier for us to achieve, which is when the user orders WordPress, they're going to make the decision on whether they want it for the most performant cloud, okay, or the most cost-effective cloud. So we're going to be synchronizing the rate tables from GCE, Azure, Amazon, even OpenStack on-premise. And we're going to determine for you which is the most cost-effective destination or which is the most performant. So the user may turn around and say they want the most performant destination, and based upon the artifacts, the items that are in the canvas and their sizing, will determine possibly that the outcome is Google, okay, that GCE is a better destination for performance of this service. Just as equally, they may turn around and say the most cost-effective deployment for this service could actually be on-premise OpenStack or could be GCE again. So that's very much service brokering wrapped up there. We're also adding notifications, which is being long awaited. So from Automate or the product, there will be a little notification window that can be written to. So as things are happening inside of CloudForms, the user, the consumer, inside of the self-service UI is going to have live feed to everything that's going on. And you'll be able to write messages to that bus effectively. And then service topology, you just saw in the last mock-up from Serena. We're going to be showing you the topology of the service. We show you the topology of the infrastructures. We show you the topology of the software-defined networking, and we're rolling we're rolling the topology widget across all of our providers. But we're also going to be taking it into other areas of the product, like services. I want to see what the graphical construct of my service looks like. What is its relationships to software-defined networking, software-defined storage? What are the configuration management items that are being linked to what virtual machines or to what networks and switches and everything? So coming back to the service broker theme, there's one particular thing that we're very interested in doing, which is called Resourceless Service Items. So technical name, but what it's going to do is very clever. We believe that the best images to use are actually inside of the marketplace of Google. They're inside the marketplace of Amazon and Azure. You don't need to upload your images to those clouds, okay? So the RHEL 7.2 image sitting inside of GCE is certified and accredited by Red Hat. Why do you need to put your own there? So if you can adopt that methodology, what we're going to allow you to do is tag items inside of the marketplaces, okay? And what that's going to allow you to do is basically suggest to the service what it is you want it to be constructed from, and then CloudForms will arbitrate and work out exactly what they should be. So for instance, today, it could be RHEL 7.2, and tomorrow it could be RHEL 7.3. And we want CloudForms to be able to arbitrate that decision for you based upon cost and performance, pull out the right image resource from the destination cloud that it's going to, and put that in place. And that's something that we're going to be doing for CloudForms 4.2. Now, interestingly, I included OpenStack here because I believe that we're in a unique position in CloudForms that when we do things on GCE, Azure, and Amazon, we can also leverage those on-premise as well. So, you can go across your OpenStack environment and tag up images. What we're saying here is that you're not explicitly telling the service that you want AMI ID 123 or GCE ID 123. You're saying, I want a tag. I want to instantiate RHEL 7.2 called John's RHEL. Now that means that in the future, and this is not CloudForms 4.2, so I will make that statement, that we can start to look at introducing things like desired state. So users will be able to come to the service catalog, and they will be able to order an item from the catalog like they do today, but there'll be a new option. There'll be a new option that allows you to subscribe to the catalog item. And when you subscribe to the catalog item, if you think about the things that Serena was talking about with blueprints and versioning underneath, and the tagging capabilities here, what we will be able to do is swap out the entire blueprint underneath a service to version 2 and apply those changes to anybody who subscribed to the service. So that's the direction we're trying to get to. And this is one of the steps that we're going through in the early phases. So on to some of the features outside of brokering. So on customer experience, we wanted to listen to you guys out there, our customers, and implement some of the, the top asks. So an interesting question to ask any vendor is actually, what is the biggest pain point of your existing customer base? And we've got a couple. This is the first one, which is we wish to be able to allow artifacts, items to be imported and exported between air-gapped environments. Now, you can do this today. You can invoke Red Hat Consultancy. You can go to GitHub to RH Consultancy, and you can grab a load of scripts, and it will do it for you perfectly fine. We're going to productize that, and when we productize it, we're going to be introducing a new specification format to doing that, and that's going to be Tosca. Okay, so when you export something out of CloudForms, it's going to be in Tosca format, and then when you import it back in, it's going to go back into CloudForms format, okay? Because Tosca doesn't meet all of our needs. However, that does mean when it's in that transitionary period, it is Tosca formatted. So we're going to be evaluating what use cases that could expose. Maybe there's other editors that can get in there and play with our items, add stuff to it, and so on. The next item we want to go after is centralized administration. Interestingly, today, we're actually a decentralized administration setup. So we have regions, and you go to each region, and you master them. You administer your regions that way. But a number of customers have expressed a desire to do it centrally. Log into one region, and then from that one region, whatever I do inside of that region gets routed to the relevant destinations. So as you create regions, possibly for each country or for each data center, you can actually have a central region, log in there, and just have visibility, single pane glass view across your entire infrastructure and single management interface. So that centralized administration that will be coming along. And interestingly, this is slightly linked to the PG logical stuff that we saw earlier on as far as replication and stuff like that. So everything in 4.1 is now starting to show benefits that you're going to see in 4.2 on the core platform. So I had a complaint about this graphic, actually. They said, can you not update it to a more modern car? And it's like, well, that's a really cool car. I don't know, when I was young, that was the car I always wanted. But the reason for this is that we have an operations UI. So we've got the self-service UI, and you've seen the service designer coming along, and they're all brand new technologies built on Angular and lots of clever stuff. The operations UI is actually been around since day one of the product. So it needs to go through a revamp, and that's what we're going to be doing in CloudForms 4.2. So we're going to be going into the operations UI, working through it, and resolving any performance issues that are there, and really making it fast. And the reason for that graphic is just because something is classic or legacy doesn't mean that it's slow, because that's a pretty fast car. From a Git integration point, so this isn't the number 2 ask on existing customers' wish lists. Is they say, well, Automate's really nice to get the result of, but trying to work with it is a pain. So what they wanted is they wanted the ability to be able to choose their interactive development environment of their choice to be able to work with Automate. So whatever IDE is their flavor, they can use. So the Git integration allows us to basically put Automate models inside of Git repos. Okay, so we can now edit Automate outside of CloudForms, play with it, test it, like it, love it, and then we can pull that repo straight into CloudForms and then use branches and labels to determine which one we're going to put in place. So you can now say, right, in my test environment, I'm going to pull this one, and in my production environment, I'm going to pull this one. We'll also support post-commit hooks so that if you're doing any CI/CD, you can hook into that pipeline and have CloudForms do that for you. Now, one of the interesting areas here is that CloudForms, as you should all know, has a very, very rich REST API. So we're looking at maturing that further for pipeline execution. Staying on the customer experience, there's RFEs, and I've been in a number of customer meetings over the last few days, and the one thing I do stand up and say every single time is that we're very interested in your RFEs. So as you have RFEs, enhancements that you wish to make to the product, we listen to you guys first. So bring them to us, we'll triage them, validate them, and then we'll align them to a release. So we've got a few, these are just examples, but we've got a few RFEs that we're going to be tackling from a pure customer standpoint that may not align to our strategic direction, but the customers want them, so we'll look at putting those in. So on to actually the largest section of this presentation, which is provider updates for 4.2. We have a lot of providers. We've gone into new forays, new areas of infrastructure. So we've always done cloud and we've always done Virt. We did physical back in 3.1, I think it was, with satellite, and then we brought containers in as well. But with software-defined networking coming along with the help of Nuage, we're also getting help from Google on the SDS side of things. So from software-defined storage, be able to expose block and object stores to CloudForms, and then further config management changes. So I'm going to hand over to.
Yeah. Hi, Scott Drennan from Nuage. And as John said, we've been working with the CloudForms team now for about 9 months, getting the framework around software-defined networking and CloudForms to be sensible across multiple clouds and multiple virtualization providers. And the first instance of that is OpenStack. And we've also got in 4.1, not in the release, but in demo capability, an initial Nuage integration. But what I'm primarily here to talk to you about is 4.2, which is when things really start to get interesting. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Nuage Networks, we provide virtualized networking across a bunch of different cloud and virtualization providers. So OpenStack, CloudStack, VMware, AWS, GCE, Hyper-V. So all of these being able to have common network connectivity across them, common network policy across them is very useful. But just doing that on its own means that you have to manage all of these individually. So what we're doing with CloudForms is exposing that in the context of the broader compute management. So it's really exciting to be working with that as an orchestration layer to provide that common experience across all of the different platforms that we support. So, like I said, we've got common policy and connectivity. And one of the key things that means we need to introduce into the network provider beyond what's done with OpenStack is cross-linking, not just between clouds, but between providers. So having this, exposing the same network into multiple virtualization providers. So you can have a VMware VM and an OpenStack VM, and potentially even a GCE VM, all talking on the same network at the same time. And then there's all of the usual CloudForms goodness, inventory, metrics, exposing events. And then another key aspect is really the SDN lifecycle management. So being able to, from the UI and from Automate, actually provision, create, update, delete, all of the necessary things to build your network. So making sure those abstractions are in place and they're easy to use from the CloudForms UI and from Automate, and also likely from Ansible. So if you want more information, come talk to me. But there's very limited time here, so I'll hand it back over to John.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, and it's so with many thanks to Scott and Nuage and the team for helping us build out the software-defined networking models that is going to accelerate us towards obviously supporting Nuage and other cloud networking. Neutron is the first one that you can start playing with inside of CloudForms 4.1, obviously. Okay, so the next provider, very, very interesting provider. So I don't think anybody thought this one was going to come along, but as more development organizations inside of Red Hat get to terms and understand what CloudForms is bringing to the party, this group came to us and said they want to join, they want to be part of that party. They feel that there's benefit in having a middleware provider. As we start to dig into it, we definitely concur. There's absolutely a good reason to have middleware as a provider. So the reason for doing this is that you may have some EAP clusters out there running JBoss applications. Now you can actually hook those up to CloudForms. You can see the inventory of those. You can see the applications that are running. You can get the metrics from them. Okay, so you can see how much they're utilizing of the EAP server on a per application, per cluster basis. But we can also get to the events and start to launch some use cases such as, the JVM heap size starts to blow up. Then we can actually do something with that inside of CloudForms. Okay, we can see the topology and the cross-linking of how those applications are represented in their clusters on the EAP servers. And don't forget, those EAP servers that are running are probably virtualized. Okay, they're probably they could even containerized, right? So, they could even be containerized where you have many containers of EAP running on the same virtual machine that is actually running on, VMware or Rev or OpenStack. So when you talk about topology and cross-linking, you can now hopefully see the benefit where, from a graphical point of view and a relationship building point of view, we can actually track the application that is a single Java app all the way through to the underlying ESXi server that is hosting all of the layers of the onion that are supporting that application. And then from a lifecycle management point of view, there's two areas here. The first thing is to deal with it from an operations infrastructure point of view. If you need another EAP server, CloudForms will give you another one. You just scale it. You say, right, we're getting metrics from a middleware that is saying that we need more power. What we'll do is we'll increase that power and we'll deploy more EAP servers. From an application standpoint point of view, and going back to what Serena was talking about, that canvas and the toolbox that has VMware virtual machines, that has GCE instances and AWS instances and so on, you can drag those instances, those items onto the canvas and build those relationships and publish and deploy. By having middleware, you can also drag a Java app onto the canvas and do the same thing. Okay, so now we can support in CloudForms 4.2 real, true Mode 1 and Mode 2 hybrid services. So a service that your consumers are ordering, it's unlikely to be WordPress. It's unlikely to be that simple. It's likely to actually have containers. It's going to have virtual machines. It's going to have physical items. It'll have storage. It'll have networking. And it could have Java apps too in CloudForms 4.2. Onto VMware update. So we wish to get storage profile support into 4.1. Unfortunately, we missed the boat on that one due to dependent technology. Wasn't available, but that technology is now available, so we're going to crack on and give you profile support. That will allow you to choose between magnetic and SSD type storage. We can use CloudForms metrics and eventing to obviously help us make those decisions, and we're going to be adding that support. We also rolled the new dashboards, which aren't so new anymore. They were in 4.0 and all across containers. You're going to see them go across all the providers over a period of time. VMware is going to be next. They're going to get the new sexy-looking provider dashboards that you may have seen. And then also tagging of distributed switches is important. From a Rev standpoint, Red Hat Virtualization, as I said in CloudForms 4.1, they adopted the provider. That's a really big move because that moves us on to many new phases with them where they will own the life cycle of that provider and so on going forward. But in CloudForms 4.2, they're going to basically migrate all of the day 2 management capabilities that you see inside of the Rev console into CloudForms. So if you want to add a disk to a VM, you do it in CloudForms. If you want to add a network to a VM, you do it in CloudForms. If you want to order a VM, you do it in CloudForms. If you want to create a data store cluster for Rev, then you go to Rev to do that. That's a day 1 task. Okay? So there's going to be a clear separation between what are day 2 consumer activities and will result in using CloudForms versus what are day 1 setup activities that you use Rev for. They're also looking at doing a V2V migration assistant. Clearly, there's a lot of mileage in replacing VMware with Rev. Okay, so we want to make that as easy as out of the box as possible, and there's no better platform to do that than with CloudForms. CloudForms has the visibility inside of VMware, has the visibility inside of Rev, it has the automation, it has all Ansible plugins. To actually achieve this, you could do today. Okay, what they're going to do is they're going to productize it, put wizards around it, and Serena will work her magic and make it look amazing. And then there's a couple of things around the SDK that they'll do as well. They'll embrace the over SDK and move away from the current provider technology. Ansible Tower. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. We're going to be creating the relationships. We want the Ansible playbooks to plug directly into any artifact that is on the canvas. To do that, we need to build that relationship model. The demonstration that we'll be doing somewhere between now and probably Halloween time is we want to drag a number of VMs onto the canvas in the service designer. We want to drag a job template playbook onto the canvas. We want to wire them, okay, just draw a line. I don't want to do anything more than draw a line between the two, okay? And then from there, once we publish it and the consumer orders it, CloudForms will know that it needs to instantiate the two virtual machines, and then it will resolve the relationships and run that playbook on those virtual machines for you with no fingers. Satellite, Red Hat Satellite, our second configuration management provider. We're going to be supporting host group parameters. Yeah, it's a small change, but it has a big impact. At the moment, to use Satellite, you have to, if you wanted to support different languages of distribution, then you would have to create different host groups to do that when working with CloudForms. In the future, we're changing that so that we adopt more of the core capabilities and technologies of Satellite. So for OpenShift moves into its third semester of capability. So OpenShift templates. What we're going to be able to do with CloudForms, and if you recall from the middleware provider, I said that you could deploy new EAP servers. Okay, so on an OpenShift side of things, we're going to be looking at doing that too. We're going to be looking at how to scale the OpenShift environment and do node actions. And that's very much about the lifecycle management of OpenShift. But we also wish to be able to have OpenShift applications included in the toolbox on the canvas. Okay, so whilst we're going to support Java apps to be placed, VMs, cloud instances, storage, networking, we don't believe that OpenShift should be left behind. So we're going to build in the capability that once you've crafted the application inside of OpenShift with its routes, its services, its volumes, and of course its pods. Once you've crafted that application aside of OpenShift and you're happy with it, you will then be able to take the entire construct, which is an OpenShift template, and place that onto the CloudForms canvas as well. So now you can deploy Mode 2 and Mode 1 all through the service catalog from CloudForms. Chargeback will be up-revved a little bit more with some more support, particularly around IP addresses, volumes, and stuff like that. At the moment, it's CPU memory of the pods, but we want to be allow you to charge for all of the additional items that you get in the container world. Dashboards will improve, and then they'll also look to add capabilities around the rebalancing. So, as a node disappears or gets evacuated or something like that, we will allow CloudForms to rebalance that environment. Probably need to speed up with 5 minutes left. So, Red Hat OpenStack, lots of work going on inside of OpenStack Cloud. We're going to give you the ability to do more of the day 2 management. Okay, so like you saw with Rev, the day 2 management capabilities are going to move from OpenStack Horizon into CloudForms, and you'll be able to add volumes, detach them, request floating IP addresses, and so on. From an infrastructure standpoint on OpenStack, we're going to be doing the node management. Similar sort of story as you see across OpenShift and middleware is that you're going to be able to evacuate, start, stop nodes, deploy more, hook up the networking, and increase dashboard awareness for OpenStack. Remember that we have a third provider for OpenStack. We have the Neutron provider. So from a Neutron provider standpoint, we want to do all the lifecycle management for that. Okay? At the moment, you have to go into Horizon to create a subnet. You're going to be able to do that inside of CloudForms. Okay? So we really want those day 2 management capabilities to go across both software-defined networking, software-defined storage, compute, and so on. SCVMM, We're still unsure on the direction for this guy. So we're going to, in short term, just add more eventing and cloud init support. So if you guys have, how many SCVMM customers are in this room now? Yeah, that answers my question, I think. So, Microsoft Azure, however, how many Microsoft Azure customers are there? Oh, that's good news for Eric. So from an Azure point of view, we're going to keep moving Azure on. We're going to add more metric support, topology and cross-linking, but RDP and SSH console really important because obviously you need to access the information in Azure too. EC2 on Amazon. We're going to add Smart State to Amazon because obviously Azure got it first. So we're going to be looking at doing Smart State, and particularly the item of interest on this slide is elastic load balancers. We have to, in CloudForms, start exposing the networking constructs inside of the clouds. So ELBs, GLBs, they're very important to that canvas story. When you place a VM onto the canvas, multiple VMs onto the canvas, you're probably going to want to hook it to a load balancer. So this has come around because every single demonstration example we ever talk about, we always talk about ELBs. Right. So it's now time to actually make them first-class citizens and put them as top-level objects. Similar capabilities coming for Amazon as far as core platform changes around consoles and topology. So I'm going to pass back to Eric for Eric to talk about the GCE updates.
Test. So really quick, I know we're running out of time. A couple reasons why you would care about using Google. Like obviously we're going to continue to invest in this, but one of the things I forgot to mention, we're already integrated beyond just GCE. We're PubSub and monitoring, so that's how we do targeted refresh. Reasons why you would want to kick the tires with GCE. You can spin up a rel server in 30 to 45 seconds, so that might be pretty quick for you. The other thing is we have sustained use pricing. So the longer you run an instance, the cheaper it gets. So it'll get down to about 30% of cost. So a couple reasons to kind of try it out. Cloud.google.com, free trials.
Sorry, we're running out of time. So core platform, there's going to be changes to the we're going to be introducing a time series database. So we're working, this is a solution that's going to take probably more than 4.2 to deliver. Keep notice on this. Obviously, we're going to offer backward support to Postgres, and the likelihood is that the first TSDB will be Hawkula. Obviously, this will allow us to extend metrics hugely. And metrics at the moment are restricted to CPU memory and things like that from the compute world. But as we move more into networking and storage, we need more metrics. Pluggable providers. This is basically allowing people like Eric and Google to be able to own the life cycle of their provider. It's very important, okay, because at the moment, every time we do a release, it's massive, as you've seen from the deck. We want to restrict this down and let Eric release his provider when he wants to do it, okay? And the same for Nuage and all of the other providers that we have. Okay, so on to CF.next. There's only 3 slides to this. I'll be very quick. We're going to be looking at Red Hat storage, okay? So storage is going to be becoming a provider with all of the normal core disciplines. Ceph and Gluster will be exposed into CloudForms for you to use and consume. Any vCloud Air in the room? Who's vCloud Air VCD? Anybody? 1, 2, okay. So you'll be interested in this provider. We're going to be adding a provider that will hook up to the vCloud Air API, doing exactly the same stuff as we do across everything else. This will actually be very similar to an OpenStack provider. Think of OpenStack, cloud, that's where VCD is going to be placed. You'll get the inventory, the metrics, you'll be able to deploy vApps with inside of CloudForms. Put those vApps onto canvases with Rev VMs and OpenStack instances. So that's going to be very interesting because I don't believe VMware has that concept of a hybrid. They're VMware, they don't know GCE or Azure and so on. So when we look at our canvas, we're able to just put everything on there, whatever destination you want to support. Back to just go for it. Okay, so GCS, Google Compute Storage. We talked earlier on about going into storage. We need to expose block storage, object storage, and we're going to be putting a new provider in conjunction with Google, obviously, to do their storage aspects. Particular point here is that you will be able to go into OpenStack, select an instance, and just throw it to GCS, okay, which is really cool. So like a Cinder backup service. Right, release schedule. It's not a surprise. We released today. GA was 4.1, so get your hands on that. Next release will be December, and then the next one will be June. We've got a number of sessions coming after mine that will be interesting to you if you're in the CloudForms world. Thank you very much for attending.
you.